Biden's cancer, like anyone's cancer, is tragic, but that don't mean that the cover-up of his cognitive decline weren't disgusting. Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. We stream on Rumble every day at these times. Join us there and get Rumble Premium. During the run-up to the election, we reported continually and openly and honestly about Biden's cognitive decline. The idea that there's a cover-up there is, in a way, absurd and appalling because you can't cover up something that's plain and evident and obvious. You can only reframe it according to their agenda. But leaked excerpts of Biden's interview with Robert Hur suggest that his cognitive decline was so evident and appalling that anything other than his immediate withdrawal and capitulation from the 2024 campaign amounts to corruption. How can we ever trust them again? Who was really running the country? Two questions that suggest themselves. Let's have a look at Robert Hur's interview. Let's have a look at Alex Berenson's reporting. Let's break down together what these disclosures, as well as the withholding of these disclosures, tell us about American democracy then and now.
You know, the audio of Joe Biden talking with special counsel Robert Hur has just dropped.
Hey, he was senile. What's your excuse? Learn how to pronounce dropped.
That it was obtained by Axios. And the two-day interview, remember, happened in October of 2023. And after that, Hur described Biden as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
Remember, of course, he was being interviewed about his possession of classified documents. It was already an inquiry into potentially suspicious, imprudent, and maybe even illegal behavior. But the revelations of this conversation were clear. Joe Biden was not capable of running the country. Always remember, at that time, people were claiming he was sharp as a tack, that he was a brilliant man. Joe Scarborough said, he's as sexy and as virile now as he's ever been, and I drink his pheromones at bedtime. He didn't say that, but he kind of seemed to mean that.
I said at the beginning of the show that was a very, very charitable way to describe how Biden came off now that we've heard this key part of the audio. Here he struggles to remember when his son Beau died. Watch.
We were living in Chambers Road, and there were documents related to the Penn Biden Center or the Biden or the cancer failure shot or your book. Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period, except the president. I'm not a mean thing to say. I mean, he just thought that she had a better shot of winning.
Now remember, at the time, Merrick Garland had been subpoenaed to release this information because already there were rumors that Joe Biden was unfit for office because he was evidently, plainly and visibly unfit for office. I don't want to stray too far into the realm of conjecture. We'll stop and have a quick look at what Mike Benn says. Scandal's much worse because Merrick Garland, crooked Justice Department, was subpoenaed by Congress to release it. He defied the subpoena after jailing Bannon for defying one. Then the DOJ refused to jail Garland. Aside from the injustices experienced by Steve Bannon, we have to consider what the process of selection for the Democrat Party leadership might be. What kind of president do they want? What type of presidents have we been subjected to in the past? Is it possible to assess and assume on the basis of this information that the primary requirement for the President of the United States is that you are malleable, a hollow, empty shell that can be manipulated by whatever interests ultimately run the country? Certainly that seems to be a reasonable assumption. Here's some reporting from Alex Berenson from his Substack, Unreported Truths. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was even more demented than we knew. Last night, excerpts leaked from Biden's October 2023 interview with Robert Hur, the federal prosecutor who investigated him for possessing classified documents, seemed to reveal. They are awful. They show a man in severe cognitive decline. Biden couldn't recall even basic facts like when elections are held. Yes, Joe Biden, who had lusted for the presidency his entire life, thought Donald Trump had won in November 2017, not 16. It wasn't a verbal slip. He didn't know. An aide had to correct him. Even that summary doesn't capture Biden's struggles. What he says is bad. How he says it is much worse. His voice is weak and whispering. He goes silent for stretches, loses his train of thought, offers oddly emotional asides about his son, Beau, though he couldn't remember when Beau died. He seems not to remember being vice president. He speaks of being a senator and then jumps to running for president. In the end, the classified documents investigation went nowhere, like the similar case involving Donald Trump. It shouldn't have. But along the way, Hur, a well-respected prosecutor who had been the U.S. attorney for Maryland in Trump's first term, discovered something far more important: proof of Biden's incapacity. The Hur interview is so crucial because Biden and his handlers went to such lengths to protect Biden from the press or public scrutiny even before the 2020 election. Biden uses teleprompters for his speeches, of course. His press conferences were rare and closely scripted. He had been told what questions would be asked in advance. Biden's few unscripted live interactions visible to the public generally came when he left the White House to walk to Marine One. He would occasionally stumble over to the gaggle of reporters yelling questions at him and speak for a few seconds. Hur's interview with Biden was likely the only time during Biden's entire presidency when he faced lengthy questions he could not control. It shows why Biden and his handlers tried so hard to avoid similar situations. Already from Berenson's reporting, we get a clear depiction of a man who had to be managed to the degree that his autonomy and independence are questionable. What does that reveal more deeply? Say what you like about Donald Trump, his lack of manners, his tendency to be abrupt and abrasive, his perceived bravado. But this is a person who can do 3-hour-long interviews with Joe Rogan live and unedited and come across as warm and amenable. Whatever questions we may have now that Trump is the world's most powerful man, what we can certainly add to our understanding of contemporary politics is this: that Joe Biden was in that role precisely because he could be managed. This tells us that the office of president for a long while has not been an executive position, but has been a position in which malleable individuals are controlled by sources and forces that are out of sight for ordinary members of the public. Hur wrote in his report on the investigation last year that Biden was a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. That doesn't sound like the perfect description of the President of the United States. If that was my next-door neighbor or a beloved relative, that's fine. But for a person that's supposed to be the avatar and epitome of American power, it's deeply concerning. Hur interviewed Biden in 2023. If Biden and the people around him had their way, he would have been president through January 2029. The interview suggests he'll be nearly vegetative by then if he lives that long. Now, we since have learned that Joe Biden has a very corrosive and aggressive cancer and is unlikely to live more than, 18 months. It's possible that people knew about his cancer diagnosis even then. Certainly, this clip seems to suggest he did.
That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
So, in addition to his cognitive decline, he was seriously ill. In today's amnesiac culture, it's difficult to remember that this man was being run as president against Trump. It's only really by the miracle of modern democracy that he was removed from the campaign and the social media conversation wasn't managed and moderated to the degree where he inevitably became president. Remember, social media spaces were being tightly controlled. You couldn't even openly speak about Hunter Biden's laptop. It's only really a few missteps and American democracy that prevented Joe Biden from being president right now. When the Justice Department released Hur's report on his investigation in February 2024, the legacy media immediately downplayed its importance and attacked Hur's motives. In what is supposedly a legal document, these inclusions certainly look gratuitous, to say the least. The New Yorker wrote in an article about Biden's righteous fury over the report. 2 days later, the Washington Post would claim in a headline that Hur had a 5-hour face-off with Biden and Wright. Hur's description of Biden's demeanor as that of a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory would infuriate Biden's aides, who saw it sharply at odds with what occurred as the president sat that for voluntary questioning. Her report made clear that Biden's cognitive impairment was severe and that the White House was covering it up. That scheme should have been the story of the 2024 campaign from the moment the report became public. Instead, the media looked the other way, even as Biden's flubs and lapses visibly worsened. In a sense, the reckoning that the Democrat Party should have faced has yet to be faced. They are a deceptive organization who, along with their partners in mainstream media, have managed reality to a degree that amounts to little more than hollow, vacuous propaganda, a world voided of facts and truths, to the point where a cancerous, deteriorating, senescent, elderly man was propped up to a degree that was cruel to him and to the world at large. When people were joking about Weekend at Bernie's at the time, we didn't realise how close to the truth we were. This is an article from Public. Focusing blame squarely on the Bidens and their inner circle, it allows major news outlets, including CNN, where Tapper remains a central figure, to avoid confronting their own complicity. Rather than owning up to the family, they are laundering their reputations for a post hoc expose, as if the problem was secrecy in the White House rather than silence in the press. Had it not been for the persistence of social media, which allowed true, unfiltered clips to circulate widely, and independent commentators who challenged the official narrative, voters may never have understood how serious the situation was. The legacy press didn't investigate the reality of Biden's poor health, they dismissed it. The episode confirms what millions of Americans have come to suspect, that for all their talk of defending democracy, the establishment media was more committed to defending a candidate than informing the public. The time where we can regard the legacy media as independent arbiters of information is over. They are complicit propagandists, and wherever there is public funding of a media organization, it should be denied, and wherever their enterprise is commercial, it should be thoroughly investigated. They are criminal organizations that should be shut down. I'm talking about the Times, the Sunday Times, CNN, MSNBC. Criminal organizations that lie to the public and that deceive the public and should be shut down. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think. And if you need reminding what to think, here's the way they reported on Joe Biden at the time.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
She knows so long as she was denied.
In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been.
President Biden has a photographic memory. His understanding and mastery of a complicated geopolitical situation, remarkable.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here.
I was sitting, 2 feet from him across the table, and he was, intense.
Have trouble walking sometimes? Yeah, so did FDR. He wanted GD war.
But he's totally focused. He's very sharp.
They say he's sharp in meetings and so on.
Very lucid, very well informed. Biden is stately, and he comes with gravitas. There hasn't been, as far as I know, a single claim that Biden made a mistake.
Ageism is an issue. Americans have a rich history of holding people's physical characteristics against them. Okay, you can ask African Americans.
He's older. That doesn't mean that he is unfit, and there's a lot of ageism there.
Now, this age attack, this obsession by the right.
Joe Biden may not be able to speak for himself the way that he used to.
They want to think to take on government if we get out of line, which they're talking again about, and that's him lying around.
I think people should be speaking up for Joe Biden.
Americans and reporters in the media are just judging him by a physical appearance, and it's horribly unfair. Age is an asset.
He showed exactly how with it he is.
The flip side of this coin is that he has a tremendous amount of wisdom and experience.
Have you heard any concerns from anyone who has met with President Biden about him seeming a little slower?
No.
More wild speculation from a bunch of people who have probably never been in a room with Joe Biden and certainly don't have medical degrees that I'm aware of.
You don't get paid for performance to be president. The job is not a job of endurance. I don't see Donald Trump out bike riding like Joe Biden.
It's the Hillary's email. All they have is that he's old. He can clear a dementia bar, and that's probably a win.
The media are not fair, and they're getting less and less fair, and things are frightening. You have Wall Street Journal running a horribly sourced piece saying that Biden is unfit.
Dubious Wall Street Journal report about the president's acuity.
Shoddy story by the Wall Street Journal questioning Biden's mental fitness.
Wall Street Journal story had a lot of flaws, as you said. But Sinclair, they didn't do any original reporting. They didn't follow up. They didn't do any work.
Here today is Hersh Goldberg Poland is still, he is not here with us, but he's still being held by Hamas.
But a huge part of the Mueller report talks about Russian disinformation tactics. And one of the themes this election cycle is that Joe Biden is too old to lead. And so everyone is seizing upon this. And it is a classic disinformation tactic.
I think we all know that what will happen now is they'll use his cancer diagnosis to curtail and shut down any further investigation. Whether it's this story or a whole host of other stories, COVID and even personal attacks leveled against me, you now know that the legacy media are absolute liars, invested in particular outcomes, and outcome number one is that you remain ignorant, despairing, despondent, and distracted, particularly from any alternative sources of information, let alone alternative sources of political power. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. In the meantime, if you can, stay free, get Rumble Premium, and join us every day. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.